Good morning.
Good morning po.
Okay. So, we're going to discuss about, wait lang. Ayusin ko lang yung ano natin. So, yung week 13 na tayo, which is why we believe that the laws of physics are universal. Which is part 1 nito. Okay. So, itong ano natin ay nasa module. So, si screen share ko lang. Yan. Okay. So, ito yung lecture natin for today.
And for this morning, we will be talking about motion in a straight line muna. Okay? Motion in a straight line. Because motion does not happen only along a straight line. Minsan ay merong pataas, pababa, okay? Paikot-ikot. But para maintindihan, isa-isa lang. Okay? So motion in a straight line. Right. So, but before we continue, let me just discuss a concept na medyo madalas na makaligtaan sa pagdi-discuss ng motion. Okay? Kasi this concept is for other ng motion, but it's good to understand na rin. Okay? It's good to understand na rin, alright? So, yeah. So, whenever you describe something that is moving, you are comparing it with something that is assumed to be stationary or not moving. O bakit sinabing assumed? Assumption lang na stationary or not moving. Kasi wala naman talaga, in reality, wala naman talagang bagay na hindi kumikilos. Kahit nakatigil yan, akala mo tumitigil for as long as, o kung, sige, gato na lang. Okay? In reality kasi wala talagang hindi nagmo-move, di ba? Kahit na sabihin mong yung patay, o di ba, nakalibing, ayan, hindi yan nagmo-move. But in effect, it's still moving as long as it is on the earth and the earth is rotating around the sun. So, meron pa din motion, di ba? Something like that. So, kino-compare natin into something that is assumed to be stationary. Like for example, let me give you a picture of that. Okay? Ayan. If you are riding a train, okay, nakasakay ka sa train, okay, tapos yung train tumatakbo na, di ba? Umaandar. And then nakaupo ka lang doon. You're just sitting on the train, alright? You might construe that the person next to you, if you're the one observing, is not moving, okay? And what the people that are moving to you based on your position are the people who are walking on the train. O, kasi may mga tao naglalakad naman kahit umaandar yung train, di ba? And for you, because you're the one observing, they are the ones that are moving on the train. Okay? Now, your view is based on a reference that is the train. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, the person sitting next to you, if you're the one observing, is not moving relative to the train. Okay? But in effect, if the person who is observing is outside the train, kunyari nandun sa waiting shed o nasa platform, and then he sees you, nakaupo sa train, pero yung train umaandar, he will conceive you as moving because her reference frame is the earth, diba? The ground. So, relative to the ground because the train is moving. So, yun yung sinasabi natin na comparing with something that is assumed to be stationary or not moving. Okay? So, the background that is used for comparison, you call that the frame of reference. O, diba? So, if you are on the earth, halimbawa, even if everything stands still on the earth, okay? Lahat ng nandoon, and for as long as the earth is rotating around the sun, then there is still moving or there is motion. Okay? Because if the person is observing you, let's say from the moon, then you are moving because the earth is rotating around the sun. So, yan yung tinatawag natin na frame of reference. Okay? So, the frame of reference used depends on the type of movement and the position from which you are observing. Kagaya nga ng sinasabi ko kanina, di ba? Okay, so no frame of reference is more correct than any other. Okay? Than any other. So wala, there's nothing more correct. So it always depends on your frame of reference, okay? Depende lagi sa iyong na-observe, okay? With relative to what background, okay? So it's always the background that you use, right? So all movement is described according to some frame of reference. Diba? All movement. O kaya lang, syempre, for our discussion of motion, right? Uh, yun. So later on siguro in your higher learning of motion, yung concepts about motion, saka pa lang magiging clear or apparent or makikita nyo yung impact ng frame of reference. In fact, class, as far as I know, yung frame of reference, yan yung ginamit ko sa, nakita niyo ba yung movie na, napanood niyo ba yung movie na Back to the Future? Ganyan. Something like that. So, may mga frame of reference, di ba? Yan. Okay. Anyway, so to start with, let us now move on to motion. So, before we can measure motion, so, siyempre, i-describe muna natin siya. Okay, so, how do we know that there is motion? Okay? So, any change in position, okay, in a certain amount of time is motion. Like for example, you are at one end of a hall, tapos naglakad ka towards the end. So that is the change in position na sinasabi natin. Now, if you measure how much time it took you to travel from one end of the hall to the other end, okay, then and then you get the rate at which you covered that distance, then you are actually measuring motion, di ba? But what kind of motion? Okay? So, motion in straight line muna tayo. So, first, let us discuss what speed is. So, speed is the rate at which an object moves. So, pag sinabi nating rate, there is a time element. So, kagaya kanina, di ba, sinabi ko, if you move from one end of the hall towards the other end, tapos mineasure mo yung time that took you to cover that distance, then you get the ratio of the distance over that time, okay? Then that gives you speed. Okay? How fast did you go? Did you travel that distance? Yung ibig sabihin. So, it's symbol, speed is equal to distance over time. Okay? Ayan. So, speed is distance over time. Alright. So, using this formula, you can compare the distance and time that two runners can run or that two cars can travel or any other. If you're comparing, di ba? Okay. Speeds of various objects that are moving. So let's say two runners yung kino-consider natin here. Okay? So like for example, if two runners run the same distance, okay, the same distance yung tatakbo nila. Kagaya sa mga track and field, di ba? Yung mga takbuhan na na competition, di ba? They're going to run a distance of 100 meters, 200 meters, something like that, di ba? Kaya tinatawag natin 100-meter dash. Or 200-meter dash. O, di ba? Yun yung mga ganon. Okay? So, if two runners run the same distance, the runner who took the longer time must have run at a slower speed. And the runner who took the shorter time must have run at a faster speed. O, di ba? Kaya nga, kunyari, sa 500-meter dash, o sabay-sabay sila mag-i-start. Okay? Now, the first one to reach the finish line is considered to be the fastest. O, di ba? Kasi it took him the shortest period of time to cover the 500-meter distance. So, yan yon. Or, so here we held the distance constant. So, anong nag-vary dito? Yung time. Okay? O, di ba? The shorter the time, the faster the speed. O, so sa isang banda naman, what if it is time that we hold constant? O, ganito, if two runners took the same time, amount of time, okay, to travel, di ba? So, yung time ang i-constant natin. Kunyari, after 10 minutes. Okay, so, tatakbo sila after 10 minutes. Okay? So, after 10 minutes, you measure the distance that they have covered. Of course, the one who covered a longer distance ran faster. O, di ba? Kasi in this case, the longer the distance, the faster the speed. Okay? Yan. Alright. So, now, how do in measuring, of course, we make use of units. Okay? So, distance is usually measured in meters or in kilometers, although the unit that we use to measure distance is not limited or not confined only in meters or in kilometers. Others are measured in miles, in feet, or in inches, centimeters. But when we talk about moving objects, like for example, running or traveling car or train, usually we measure, okay, distance in meters or kilometers. And the time is measured usually in seconds or in hours, okay? So that is why speed is usually measured in meters per second or in kilometers per hour, okay? So, I hope that is clear. Right, so, continuing, ayan. In addition to speed, o, di ba, direction in which an object move is needed to describe motion. Because objects do not move, tawag dito, um, just in one direction. Okay? They could be moving in various directions. Di ba? So it's important that direction should be described as well alongside the speed. So to describe both the speed and the direction of motion, velocity is needed. Okay? Velocity. So here we can say that, oh, sige, let's have an example here. Suppose a runner moves eastward at 10 meters per second. Her speed is 10 meters per second, but her velocity is 10 meters per second eastward or towards the east or east. So this is an example of velocity. Okay? So makita nyo, both velocity and speed have the same numerical um, value in this case, okay? But one has been described with direction. So kung minsan it's better, 'di ba? Na i-ano natin yung direction. So mamaya we will be able to see yung advantage of velocity over speed, okay? So if we put that in symbol, since parang speed lang din siya plus the direction, then to get the magnitude of the velocity of a moving object, we make use of this formula. Okay, so velocity equals distance over time. So makikita nyo kanina, speed is also equal to distance over time. So if velocity is equal to distance over time and speed is also equal to distance over time, then we can make use of the same formula for both. Okay, so V is equal to X over T. So that's our equation to determine velocity, okay, or speed. Alright, so let's have sample problems muna as we continue. Alright, para makita nyo yung usefulness of the equation. Okay, some of you, this might be just very simple. Okay, so but then again, we'll just do it just the same. Alright, so at what speed did the plane fly if it traveled 1,760 meters in 8 seconds? So here you were given a step-by-step solution. So the first step is to write the formula. So here makita nyo that the formula is the formula to get the speed. Okay? Now for this particular problem, the formula here is also our working formula. So pag sinabi natin working formula or working equation, it is an equation where you can directly substitute the given information or given data. So in this particular example, okay, the formula is also our working equation. Okay? Kasi ang tinatanong mismo is yung speed. Alright? O kasi pag minsan pwedeng tanungin ay time, pag minsan naman ay distance. Okay? So you have to rearrange the formula to come up with a working equation. Alright? So since this is our working equation na, we can already substitute directly the data. Okay, the given data. So for distance, we have, kasi speed equals distance over time. Okay, so distance is 1,760 meters and the time is 8 seconds. And then we carry out the operation, 1,760 divided by 8 is 220 and meter over second is meter per second. So the speed of the plane, all right, is 220 meters per second. Okay, so that is fast. Right? So sa kada segundo, mahigit 200 metro kaagad ang natatakbo. Okay? So another example would be, yan, ito. This one, sige, basahin natin yung problem. The velocity of light is 3.0 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. How long does it take light to reach the Earth from the Sun, which is 1.5 times 10 to the 11 meters away? Okay, so our equation for speed is equal to distance over time. But in this particular problem, it is not asking for speed. So the equation V equals X over T is not our working equation, right? So you have to rearrange that equation to come up with a working equation. So ano ang tinatanong? Time, okay? So T is equal to X over V. So that is our working equation. Alright? So substituting now, so makita nyo, with the working equation, you can directly substitute the given information, okay? Or the given data in the uh, solution, okay? So the distance is 1.5 times 10 to the 11 meters. The velocity is 3.0 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. And dividing the value, okay? So makikita nyo here, meter and meter will cancel out. You're left with second. So the correct answer is 500 seconds. O, di ba? So kung sa cancellation ng mga units pa lang o sa evaluation ng unit, if you don't come up with the correct unit for the unknown, here the unknown is time, so dapat sa final answer is second. Okay, so if you don't get second in the process, something is wrong with your solution. Yun lang ang ibig sabihin nun. Okay? Alright. So, moving on. Ayan. So, makikita natin what's the significance of knowing velocity over speed. Kasi sabi natin, velocity is speed with a given direction. Kasi in real life, we're not just after the speed, but we're after also the direction. Okay? Kasi importante, the direction given by velocity is very important. Okay? Like I said, you let us reserve your questions later, okay? Mercy, mamaya-maya, ha? Sasagutin ko yung tanong mo mamaya. Let's finish this. Okay, so the direction given by velocity is very important. Okay? Yan. Kasi, like for example, airplane pilots, how do they know when to land? How do they know when to turn? Diba? So, kaya nga, aside from velocity, dun sa mga traffic controllers, okay, they are being directed into a certain direction. O, di ba? Kasi, ang hirap, ikaw, kung wala kang alam dyan, lilipad ka lang, mamaya mag-landing ka sa dagat, di ba? Kung mali yung direction na binigay sa'yo. Or, pwedeng magbanggaan yung mga eroplano sa ere, di ba? Lawak ako ng ere, tapos magbabanggaan ng eroplano simply because you did not follow the right direction, okay? You may have the right speed, but if you have the wrong direction, then you will end up in a wrong destination, okay? So weather forecasters must know the velocity of air masses, okay, to predict weather correctly. O di ba? Kasi sabihin nyo, magla-landfall sa ganitong lugar. O kung mali yung direction, mali yung prediction, di ba? So, yan, napaka-importante talaga. And not only that, pag nagbabiyahe ka, nagmaneho ka ng sasakyan, di ba? If you just keep on driving without giving consideration to direction, then you might end up in the wrong destination. Okay? So that's how speed and direction are important in velocity. So in real life, when we describe motion, we talk of velocity more often. Okay? Yan. Okay. So let's take a look at these illustrations para makita nyo how important velocities are. Okay? So suppose you are rowing a boat downstream and you are moving at a velocity of 16 kilometers per hour. Okay? So nagro-row ka. Pag sinabing you are rowing a boat downstream, there is already a direction there. Meaning you are rowing a boat towards the direction of the flow of water. Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. Okay? And as you row, you are having a velocity of 16 kilometers per hour. Okay? Now, the river in which you are rowing your boat is also flowing. Okay? So the flow is also motion. Okay? Dahil moving siya, meron din siyang velocity. Okay? So let's say the velocity of the river, the flowing river is 10 kilometers per hour. Okay, now, since you are rowing in the same direction as that of the river, you don't expect your velocity to be 16 kilometers per hour as well because the flowing water, you're moving in the same direction as the flow of the water, parang nabuboost yung velocity mo. So your actual velocity as you row the boat is 16 plus 10, which is equal to 26 kilometers per hour. So yun yung iyong actual velocity. Okay? So because you are rowing in the same direction as the river is flowing, your total velocity is actually 26 kilometers per hour. Okay? So this is a principle of combining velocities, which means that two velocities moving in the same direction are added together. O, di ba? Now, supposing, in the same direction kasi, may kanya-kanyang velocity. Ikaw as you row and the river as it flows, and then since they are in the same direction, okay, your actual velocity is 16 kilometers per hour because the flowing water is pushing you at 10 kilometers per hour. Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. Alright? Now, but if you, supposing, what if you have been rowing against the stream? What do you think would be your velocity? So, against. Alright. So, ibig sabihin, nagro-row ka ng boat in the opposite direction as to the flow of the water. Okay? So, let us say that you are still rowing at 16 kilometers per hour. Yun yung sarili mo. Okay? But the river is flowing in the opposite direction at 10 kilometers per hour. Okay, at 10 kilometers per hour. Now, since you are in the opposite direction, as you move upstream, o upstream naman yung opposite, okay, at 16 kilometers per hour, okay, tinutulak ka naman pabalik ng river, ng flow ng river, at 10 kilometers per hour. So, yun ang ibig sabihin nun. So, in effect, ang actual velocity mo is only 6 kilometers per hour. Yes, very good, Nicole Gabriel. 6 kilometers per hour lamang. Okay? Yan. So, makita mo, velocities that are moving in the same direction are added together, but velocities that are moving in opposite direction, you get the difference for your actual velocity. Yan. Okay? O, kaya napaka-useful, okay, nung direction. Alright? So, this idea of combining velocities is very important. Lalong-lalo na, sabi natin, in launching rockets. That is why space engineers launch rockets in the same direction as the Earth rotates. Kasi mabuboost, diba, yung velocity ng rocket ship, okay, into outer space. So, kunyari, meron siyang sariling velocity, yung rocket, and if it moves in the same direction as the Earth rotates, okay, yan, the velocity of the rocket ship will be boosted, mabuboost siya, okay, and it's going to reach the outer space or the space, kung saan man yan, okay, at a faster speed, okay, at faster velocity, all right? Okay, so with that, O, siguro in our succeeding discussions, we can already use the speed and velocity interchangeably, but we mean more of velocity, okay? Velocity. All right. Okay, so that's all about speed and velocity. Now, if you are riding, okay, if you are riding a roller coaster, di ba? Sa roller coaster kasi merong pagbilis, merong pagbagal ng takbo, at merong ding pag-turn, okay? Pag-change ng direction, okay? So, a body whose velocity is changing is said to be accelerated. And as I have mentioned, changes in velocity include increasing velocity, decreasing velocity, or change in direction. Okay, now, since we will be talking only of motion in straight line, hindi muna natin papansinin si changing in direction. Okay? So, this would be included in more advanced topics like motion along a circular or circular motion, something like that. Okay? So, straight line motion lang muna tayo. Alright? So we'll just focus on increasing and decreasing of velocity. Okay, so if a moving body is accelerating, either it is speeding up, slowing down, or changing direction. Okay, so the acceleration of an object is equal to its change in velocity divided by the time during which this change occurs. So the change in velocity is the difference between the final and the original velocity or the initial velocity. So let's see that using symbols or representation in terms of equation, okay? So the acceleration of a body is the rate at which its velocity is changing. So pag sinabi nating rate, okay, all right, time element is of importance. Para kagaya sa velocity, sabi natin, a change. So we can define velocity as a rate of change of displacement. Okay? So parang rate of changing position. Yun ang ibig sabihin. Kasi pag nag-change ka ng position, you have been displaced. So we can say velocity is rate of change of displacement. And then here we say acceleration is the rate of change of velocity. So it is velocity that is changing. Okay? So parang ganito yan to illustrate yung acceleration. Okay? You're driving a car. Okay? So habang nagda-drive ka sa highway, yung velocity mo is 60 kilometers per hour. And then, may nakita kang sasakyan na lumalapit ka na. Okay? Kasi pag hindi ka nag-change ng velocity, pwede mong mabangga. O, di ba? So, mag-change ka yun. Mag-slow down ka. Hanggang ma-maintain mo a certain distance from the car in front of you. So, na-maintain mo kunyari at 20 kilometers uh, per hour. Okay? Ayan. So, the change was from 60 kilometers to 20 kilometers. O kaya naman, um, nag-slow yung motion mo, yung takbo mo, kunyari, tumatakbo ka lang ng 20 kilometers per hour, pero wala ka namang sinusundan, so mag-change ka ngayon, di ba? Kaya nga nag-change ng gear, di ba? Para ma-increase mo yung velocity mo. Kunyari, na-reach mo yung 60 kilometers per hour. So, from 20, you change your velocity into 60 kilometers per hour. And the time you covered that change in velocity, how long did it change you? Did it take you to change from 20 to 60? Okay, if you measure that and you get the ratio, that is acceleration. Okay, so yun yung acceleration. Okay, so over a long stretch of travel, okay, so you could be accelerated many times. Okay, so sometimes you would slow down, sometimes you would speed up. Okay, so in symbol, we could write V sub I to mean initial velocity, V sub F to mean final velocity, and T for time. So the equation to determine acceleration is equal to V sub F minus V sub I over T. Okay, so with this, we can say that velocity tells us how fast something is moving, while acceleration tells us how fast velocity is changing. O, di ba? So, the greater the acceleration, the greater the velocity is changing. Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. Okay? Alright. So, to illustrate that, let us have a sample problem. Okay? Yan. So, a roller coaster, a roller coaster's velocity at the top of a hill is 10 meters per second. 2 seconds later, it reaches the bottom of the hill with a velocity of 26 meters per second. What is the acceleration of the roller coaster? Okay, so as we use the equation class, all you have to do is to determine alin ba yung final velocity, alin ba yung initial velocity. So malalaman mo yun. Pag sinabing from, okay, yun yung initial velocity. Tapos to, o di ba? Yun yung final velocity. So here, okay, our initial velocity is 10 meters per second and our final velocity is 26 meters per second. Okay? Oh, so kaya sabi dito, 2 seconds later, oh, di ba? So yun yung time that the velocity change. All right? So that is your t. And substituting now all information in our equation, we get this equation. All right? So carrying out the operation, 16 meters per second divided by 2 seconds, that would be 8 meters per second or simply 8 meters per second squared. Okay? So ibig sabihin, the unit of acceleration is meter per second squared or any unit of distance over any unit of time squared. Okay? O kung minsan naman, pwede naman you have an acceleration that says like this. For example, 10 kilometers per hour per second. O, di ba? Something like that. So, okay lang yun. So, ibig sabihin, the velocity is changing every second at, the moving object is being changing its velocity every second at a rate of, ano nga sabi ko kanina, 10 kilometers per hour. O, parang ganun yun. Okay? Para mas paliwanag kung ano yung acceleration. Okay? So, let's have another example. Ayan. Okay, so a car starts from rest and reaches a velocity of 40 meters per second in 10 seconds. So what is the acceleration of the car? So here, we assign 0 as the initial velocity. Why? Kasi at rest, any object does not have motion. So if it does not have motion, then there's no velocity. Kaya 0. O, diba? Okay, and the final velocity is 40 meters per second, and that change from 0 to 40 took 10 seconds. Right? So this is our solution to come up with 4 meters per second squared. Okay? So I hope that's clear. Right. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give you some practice exercises, okay, regarding about motion. But before that, let me give you a summary of what we have discussed, di ba? Sabi natin, motion along a straight line, and then we said speed is the rate of change of displacement, or in other words, uh, it is actually the total distance covered, okay, by a moving object over a certain period of time. Okay, now velocity on the other hand is speed with direction. Okay, and we saw that there are a lot of practical usefulness for velocity over speed. Okay, and then sabi natin acceleration is the rate of change of velocity. Okay, so it is actually the ratio of the change in velocity over a certain period of time. Okay, yun. So with this, I have given you some examples. So here are some problems from in which you can have practice solving, di ba? You can just copy it now, or you can screenshot it or picture it out. Okay, so that we can go back. Okay, ayan. So that ends our discussion already.
Okay, so that's the topic for today, which is the motion, no? So the motion. Okay? So may questions pa po ba?